Welcome to the Joyosity podcast. If you did not get a chance to listen to last week with Kindra, I highly suggest you jump in with that. If you are new to the Joyosity podcast, I'm so glad you're here. Whether you're a seasoned leader or you're just starting out, you belong here in the Joyosity community. And so we base our podcast on these three bedrock beliefs: that true leadership requires more than just a surface level strategy. It really requires a profound connection to everything that makes us human. Two, using genuine curiosity, we can create positive culture with complex people because all those complex people are all we've got to work with. And that joy is the heartbeat of a healthy leader and a healthy organization. So we're putting joy and fun and all of that right in the center of our work. And every week we bring you these dynamic conversations with experts like Kindra and other leaders sharing more than just a couple of tips to help you lead well. We're building a movement with you based on the hard-won wisdom, the real-life experiences, and the leading research that's out there to help us. I'm Jen Whitmer. I'm an international speaker and leadership consultant and all-around joy bringer, hosting you and guiding you along the way. And together, we're going to move from ideas to action. And that's what today's episode is all about. So you might want to grab some Post-its. You might want to grab some notes. So get yourself ready so we can continue our conversation with Kindra Hall. She is a best-selling author. She's a fellow keynote speaker and a storytelling expert. And we are going to move. Our conversation last week talked about why storytelling was so important. And today, we're going to give you some tips on how do you even do that as a leader. So if you're thinking, I'm not a storyteller, that's for those other people. I promise you it is for you too. So let's welcome Kindra.
Hi.
Hey, welcome back. I'm so glad you're here. Here is what I would love to do. We've talked a little bit about like this research study from the doctors about how it helped them really with the other aspects of their job, not just the science, not just the technical knowledge. I always say that these types of skills, your communication skills, your people skills, EQ, all of those things that people like to put in a bucket that they call soft skills. I'm going to stand on a big old soapbox and call them people power skills. And storytelling is a people power skill because it is a key part of understanding yourself. It is a key part of being a better leader. It's a key part of communication. I actually think it's essential to creating change. It's part of creating structure all in your work life. Like, what's the story we're trying to tell overall through our experience? So I think it's so powerful. And so one of the things in the Story Edge, so if you haven't gotten the Story Edge, this is the book we've been talking about during the podcast. In the back, you have all of these great tools for leaders. And one of them is how to find your own story. So before we kind of jump into why finding your own story is so, or how to do that, some people are really hesitant, like, oh, that's not what I'm supposed to share. Like, how do you help us understand why the personal story is so powerful?
I think especially in business, especially people in leadership, there is a hesitancy to do so, like to keep, and I think it's just been over time and the way we've been educated to keep the two separate. But now more than ever, the lines between the personal and professional are blurred, or at least that's what is being asked and demanded. And telling your personal stories as a leader, I see it as an opportunity. It's a way to communicate in a more memorable way. Yeah, that's fine. But when we tell a story, especially a personal story, it gives us an opportunity to communicate the true essence of who we are. So instead of saying, I went to this school, I have this many years of experience, I am dedicated to innovation, excellence, and blah, blah, blah.
Whatever buzzword we're supposed to say in the interview.
Whatever it is at the time, if you were to tell, or let's say you're someone that's coming into a turnaround situation and you say, our best days are still ahead, you can keep saying those words, or you can tell a story of a time where in your personal life, you were in a turnaround situation. Maybe you were the underdog at your, high school baseball tournament, or, there was a mistake that you made in whatever it is, and that you were able to turn it around. So using personal stories can expand. It gives us, and I don't want to say read between the lines because that sounds like nefarious but as you're communicating through a personal story, there are all these threads that are woven, and they can see the other ones. You know, if I tell this story about my chore growing up, right? Like, let's say I'm a leader and I say, I'm not afraid of hard work. Yeah, my chore growing up my first chore was picking up rocks in the yard, huge boulders. I'm a kid, putting them in like a 5-gallon bucket. And I got paid like $0.25 per bucket, which took, but I could tell the whole story of, but like seeing the vision through this like hard labor. And there's a whole story I could tell that would illustrate so many aspects of who I am. So that's one reason to use personal stories. And the second reason is, I think more and more we need to find opportunities to dimensionalize ourselves. So we aren't just the one-dimensional or two-dimensional.
As I call my flat friends here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the personal stories help breathe life. They dimensionalize us. And then I would say the third reason when it comes to personal stories is always with storytelling, one of your goals is to expand the surface area so that people have more opportunities to connect with you, to see moments of connection. And so with each story that you tell, it could be like I tell a story, let's say I tell the rock picking story growing up. And maybe some people in the room are like, oh yeah, I grew up in the Midwest. I remember what those rocks look like. Okay. Maybe some people are like, oh yeah, I'm the child of a military father, and I remember how challenging that was. Or some people are thinking, oh yeah, I remember the first ridiculous job I did because I wanted to buy a G.I. Joe or buy a Barbie doll or get some baseball cards or whatever it was. So by one story, I expand the opportunity for people to see them. So it's not just, oh, we went to the same college, or, oh, we have the same, like there's so many ways that people can connect with you when you're telling your personal stories.
And that adds so much to the memory too, like they actually are learning. And the other thing that we were talking about, the power of story, is that it creates this moments of change, all of that. And in the work that I do with clients, both organizationally and individually, is I talk a lot about self-efficacy. So self-efficacy is just this fancy term really for confidence. And there are all these components to self-efficacy of experience. And one of them is vicarious experience. Oh, you've done that. Now I connect with that. And that's what you're talking about here. And also there is power in what we call previous experience. And I call that, I've done it before, I can do it again.
Yeah.
So like if you've done something before, you can do it again. And you talk a lot in the book about when you forget the hard times, because I've had 4 kids. I don't really want to have another, and it was painful, but I had a lot of them. And I don't remember how painful it was until you go back and revisit it, because we've moved on.
Yeah.
And so that sometimes gets us into trouble because we live in the gain. We're living in, I can't quite get there. I can't quite get there. Or we're living in the gap because I can't quite get there. I can't quite get there, rather than look where I have come from.
Yep.
And that builds your confidence. And you as a leader yourself builds confidence. It builds confidence in your team. Look what we have done before. We can do this again. And you have a team story around that. And it helps you coach an individual leader. Remember, you did this before. Or is there a time, maybe I haven't seen you do this. When have you done this before? And they're like, oh, gosh, when I was 22 in my first job, I had to say this to a client, and like, okay, so let's talk. You've done this before. So like that part of self-efficacy is so powerful. So one of the things that you talked about is it's some prompts that you give people about remembering when you're in the middle of a story. Like, how do you go back? Give us a couple things to help us mine for stories that can help us share these leadership experiences, create that dimension, create all those connection points, build our confidence. What are some prompts for us?
Yeah, I think, and there's, when you're talking about a leader, and you mentioned this, there's 2 aspects of this, right? There's the self-efficacy for yourself, because your ability to on a daily basis feel confident and capable is extremely important. And there's the efficacy, there's the confidence that you need to actively build in every single one of your team members and collectively as a team. And so these exercises have to, like, you have to satisfy both as a leader. So I would say, whenever, and this is one of the fundamental truths of story forward leadership, is you're always in the middle of a story. And one of the challenges that we have is forgetting the beginning. And so one of the exercises, or something that I would encourage or prompt, is when you're up against a challenge, maybe like be really clear about what that challenge is. Maybe it is that there's a deadline and everything's going wrong and it doesn't look like you're going to meet it. Or maybe it is that the goal was moved. This happens a lot in sales organizations where you're supposed to do this, but now you have to do this. And so your confidence in yourself, and then building confidence in your team that we can do these things, is going to be entirely dependent on the stories that you're telling yourself. So let's say the first one, everything's going wrong, to spend some time and to think about another time in your life, either in your professional life or your personal life, where everything was going wrong and you were able to pull it together at the very last minute. And it could be, it could be something it could be like a big sales initiative, right? And you remember it and you can use that. Or it can be, you were trying to you were in charge of the costumes at your kid's 8th grade play, and so-and-so is sick and you had to scrounge everything together. But finding those moments, so identifying the problem that you're facing or where that confidence is lacking, that gap in confidence, and then take a look at a previous time in your life when you faced a similar challenge. Now, of course, the follow-up question is always, well, what if I've never faced a similar challenge to that? It's like, okay, so maybe it isn't a direct map. But then the other thing that you can go back and look at is like, okay, so what are the qualities that are required to successfully navigate this middle of a story? Is it persistence? Well, when is a time that shows, okay, well, maybe I've never been in this situation before, but there have been times where I've exhibited incredible persistence, like back when maybe it is bringing people together. When is a time where you were able to bring the right people together, right? So yes, if you say, oh, I don't have a story, then that laziness, you're going to pay for it. So it's basically
Another question I often ask when I'm doing that and helping somebody is, where did you learn that? When did you learn that? Because sometimes you learned it by watching somebody else do it differently than you want to do it. And that's still a story that helps you build on that experience and say, hey, we can do. And then sometimes you're like, oh, so because I watched them do that, I actually did it like this. So you do have experience, but you have to go look for it for a little bit.
And I love that you mentioned it earlier, the idea of the vicarious story. There are certainly things that we've learned because of the stories we've been told or the stories that we've witnessed that then also we make our decisions and behave in certain ways as a result of those stories.
Yeah. And sometimes, I mean, I know that there are times where it's just, I cannot see it. And so Kim Cap always like, you can't see it because you're inside the ketchup bottle. Like you're the ketchup, you can't see what's on the outside. And another part of self-efficacy is coaching and feedback. Go ask somebody, what do you like? I'm struggling with this. Go ask a former coworker that you were with, a boss, a mentor, somebody that's like, when did we do this to get, like, I can't remember, or how do you see this in me? And they will often spark that because they reflect back to you things that you have forgotten because they were in the story with you, or they watched you overcome something and you didn't think it was a big deal. I have a client right now who is just like, they have changed their mental narrative so much around who is the person they're supposed to serve at work. They're a leader, they're a vice president in this place. And this switch is phenomenal, and it started to make greater boundaries for them. There's better, like, this integration in their life. Their team is following them better. All these outcomes are coming, and they're just like not recognizing that it started with them telling themselves a different story.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is so powerful. So they need a coach to reflect back. Here's what you have done. Here's what you've worked for. It's so
I mean,
powerful.
if you can be anyone now who's listening to this, and that will then serve you too, as you can be the coach for someone else on your team as a leader. That goes to supporting your team. And then I would also suggest that now that you've heard this, now that you're aware of this, one of the other important approaches is to start seeing things as stories that you can use to tell back to yourself. Like, the other last week, 2 weeks ago, I don't even remember, I had to give a big keynote presentation. I had a terrible case of laryngitis. I could not speak. It was really stressful. And even in that moment, and this is where your ability to get into this space, the quicker you can do it, the better you will be. I remember as soon as I woke up and I didn't have a voice, I was like, wow, this is going to be a story. Like, this is going to be a story that the next time it happens, like, I already have the story of the time I had the stomach flu and was still able to speak. I already have the story of the time my flight was canceled and I had to take the red eye and I had to be on stage 3 minutes after I landed. I already have the story of when I had to speak on muscle relaxants because my back was out. Now here I get the story that I can do this even without a voice. So that's an extreme example, but as you're going about your day to say, ooh, I just did something here, I can tell myself this story later. Now I can go so far as to say, text it to yourself or put it in an email or write it on, fine, go ahead, do that or don't. Sometimes just making that mental note and being like, or just put it, the number of things I put on Instagram just so I can go back and reread my stories.
Yes.
I do Instagram for myself, so I can go back and be like, oh, okay, I survived that. Oh, okay, I survived that. Okay, I survived that.
That archive, that Instagram story archive is a powerful story source.
So true.
Story source for myself. And then also it then becomes a story source for helping my clients and helping other people, and it's so powerful. We are so running out of time and I have so many other things I want to ask. And one of the things that self-efficacy piece and really digging into your own stories at the Joyosity Retreat, which is a retreat I do for leaders, it's one of the things we spend some time doing because I think our world does not value the power of reflection because we're so, what's next? We're feeling so pressured to move on to the next thing. And I think one of the things I valued so much about what you said in the book is that it is so much more valuable to spend 20, 30 minutes going and mining some stories than to keep saying the same thing over and over again and not communicating effectively. So that's what we are doing at the retreat, is spending some of that time digging into those stories, finding values, things that it's just so powerful. And I think that what you've shared with us today, some of those prompts, things you can ask yourself, how you tell the story afterwards, if you can give us like a 90-second snippet of when we've mined the story, how do I tell that story? How long because people then get caught up like, what are the words that I say? Give us a little encouragement around sharing the story.
Yeah, I think that if there is a specific situation where you need to tell a story, it's good to spend a little bit of time preparing in advance. So there's a framework that I offer, that I use, which is normal, explosion, new normal. What was, like, set the scene, what was there, what was the thing that happened, and what is now as a result. But here's a quick little checklist. I talk about this in Stories That Stick, but to make sure it's a story, it needs to have an identifiable character. There needs to be authentic emotion. There needs to be a moment, that moment where they can join you, sit right next to you in that story, and then having a specific detail or two. All of those components combined will inspire that co-creative process, have the story live within them so they can feel it instead of just process it with their brain.
Yeah, so good. So good. So back to the story that I told at the beginning of part 1 of our podcast on, now on day 110 of working out. There have been many moments where it's 7 o'clock and I haven't worked out yet. Usually I'm a morning worker outer,
Mhm.
and I need to move my body for my own mental health besides the physical and benefits for my other health. And what that has changed about me is that I'm 100% responsible for making that happen.
Mhm.
And that is a leadership skill. And
Mhm.
so the story that I could see from watching you on your roof in the snow to me being in the snow on my on
Yeah.
my walk in my
Yeah.
neighborhood in my crazy boots, that now has turned into, okay, how am I going to make this happen?
Right.
And there's so much power in sharing your story. And I'm so grateful that you lead us in that. Like that's your whole thing that you do, that it's a component of how I share with leaders. And so I'm just really grateful for your leadership and mentorship and your stories, and for sharing them with us. And I would love for you to tell people how they can connect with you. You can get Kindra's book here, right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Other ways that we can just stay connected and keep learning from you.
Yeah, I would love that. Well, my website is kindrahall.com, Kindra with an I. So lots of uh, educational posts there. I have some digital courses if you want to do some more in-depth training on your storytelling. I'm on Instagram, just Kindra Hall. That's where I do a lot of my storytelling, and then I transfer it over to Facebook. And then, of course, all three of my books are available wherever books are sold. If you're an Audible person, I will read them all to you. Yeah.
Yeah, which is a delight. I love you in my earballs. It makes me happy. And if you don't know, Audible has a little chance where you can like save a clip and bookmark it. So if you're like, I don't know how to do it, it's so powerful, and you can go back and be like, oh, this is why I wanted to remember that.
I
So
love that. That's
it's my
great.
own little story hack there. So thank you again for joining us. I so appreciate you being our new season opener and sharing such great wisdom for us as leaders and just as humans in general. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. So let me put my coach hat on for just a moment. Don't just leave this here. Take a moment. What did you learn? What's your next tiny action step? Share this episode with someone and tell them what you're going to do. Check the show notes for all the links and connect with us on LinkedIn and all the other socials, or just, drop me an email at Jen with 2 N's at jenwhitmer.com. We want to keep this conversation going with you. I know your earballs have a lot coming at them, so thank you for listening to the Joyosity podcast and being a part of our community. Please take a moment to rate and subscribe. It helps more people join us in the movement to create positive culture with complex people. So work is a joy, people are whole, and organizations flourish. Can't wait for you to join us next week.